There is plenty to chew on in the lessons that we've heard. I have no intention of preaching a long and complicated sermon, but it is worth tying them all together, and I think I have a way of doing that. You may know the artist John August Swanson. He was very prominent in the late 20th century, early 21st century. His father was Swedish, his mother was Mexican. He lived in Los Angeles. He worked mainly in silkscreen printing of original artworks that he did. They were mainly of biblical themes. And he was quite well known for his crowd scenes. He would do enormous groups of people in the feeding of the 5,000 and other crowd scenes where Jesus was teaching on the Mount, the Sermon on the Mount. A variety of scenes where people are shown in the midst of celebration, in the midst of worship. And one of the things he did that, if you've ever seen his pictures, we went over this one year in Advent here, we looked at some of his pictures. One thing that he was particularly fond of doing was giving people clothes that had biblical scenes on them. So someone would have a coat, and down the coat would be pictures. And anyone who had even a sort of passing knowledge of Bible stories could look at these pictures and recognize what they were. In a way, they were wearing the history of their faith. And in a way, by hearing these lessons this morning, I want to suggest to you we are wearing the history of our faith. There are key things that come out in these stories that should be on our garments all the time as we worship, beginning with returning from exile in the first lesson. I wonder if you put yourself in this story, would you be one of the people who have been watching and longing for the return of those you love? Or would you be in one of the people in the huge host of people coming back out of exile? Can you even imagine being in that scene, having longed for something for so long, never giving up hope that it will happen, and finally seeing it delivered? What a lovely image of what faith is for you and for me. Or the second lesson, the idea that the law is now written in our hearts. Once again, turning to Mexico for inspiration, one of the symbols that you see frequently in popular images of Christianity from Central America is the flaming heart, the heart with flames coming up out of the top of it. I can't even imagine how I would not have my heart on fire if I truly took the law of God into it completely. If I didn't hold any of myself back, how could I not be on fire? How could I not feel it inside me? How would I be able to contain it? Maybe the flaming heart is another image on our coat today. Following on from that, the third lesson, which mentions the removal of obstacles. For this, we can turn to that other great source of modern images, the internet and Instagram. There's a whole category of Instagram videos, you may have seen them, where somebody is opening a dam for the first time in 50 years, or they're suddenly some pipe that has been blocked up is cleared. There's enormous power of water that comes rushing out behind it. It's really kind of hilarious, but also scary at the same time to imagine the power that had been backed up and unable to get where it needed to go. Imagine if the obstacles were removed from the paths of the children of God. How much power there is in God's will behind us, just waiting to get out. Surely that idea of the dam breaking and the full glory of God pouring out into the world must be an image someplace on our coat, even if it still feels like an aspiration rather than a reality. Then Bethlehem and living in peace. Last summer, I drove around Central Europe, and what I didn't realize before I went on this trip was that you get off a superhighway after about 2 miles almost anywhere in Central Europe, and suddenly you're on a road that's this wide. And you're driving through villages where the roads are this wide. And some of them don't feel like they have changed for hundreds of years. We know that that isn't always the case. All kinds of things happen behind those curtains and behind those doors. But there is something about the idea of being able to go back to that way, back to that place, back to peace. It surely must appeal to every one of us. There must be a peaceful place we all remember having been once upon a time. We can go back to an image that ought to be somewhere on our coat, if only it is the peace of being in the presence of God just for a moment. And then finally, the messenger of God and Mary's yes. I'm sure you have seen Renaissance versions of this scene where the artist shows Mary looking sort of just vaguely perturbed, like, oh, is something going on around me? Here's this angel standing next to me, and she's, oh, how interesting. Then there are modern ones where she's completely freaked out. The famous one that I think of is the one of Henry O. Tanner, where Mary is sitting on her bed and there's this column of light next to her, which did not normally happen 2,000 years ago. And she plainly is just waking up and is really confused by what is going on. The beauty of this image on our coat is that God will come to us in any and all of those states. God does come to us in any and all of those states. The message continues to come, and it really doesn't matter whether we're ready to receive it at that moment. So whatever your state is in any given moment, that also can be an image on the coat. That's our heritage. But I want to end by challenging you. Our coat is not filled up. We're coming now to the crowning of the year, as it said in one of the carols. We've done a lot here this year. I wonder what other images you have on your coat, we have on our coat, from what has gone on at St. Thomas's this year. Maybe it's the blessing of the animals with dogs and cats and one crazy pig running around in the churchyard. Maybe it's picking up some piece of Nuri food and saying, wow, I never had this at coffee hour before. Maybe it's playing the maracas or the tambourine at 6 a.m. in the Grove on Easter Sunday. Maybe it's one that only you know, that's locked away, that you're pondering in your heart. Let there be things added to our coat. Let the images of God's presence among us, God's grace and mercy overflowing among us, appear on our coat as well. God continues to be good to us. God has been good to us this year. That will continue. That is our faith. Let our coat continue to be filled up. Amen.